The subtle click of my Louboutin heels against the marble floor echoed through our empty Westchester mansion as I, Vanessa Mitchell, carefully arranged the documents inside a cream-colored envelope. At 49, I had spent half my life building a partnership with a man who had been systematically betraying me, both emotionally and financially. The weight of the gold Mont Blanc pen felt substantial in my hand as I signed the card that would accompany my husband's special 50th birthday gift. A gift that had taken me 6 months of sleepless nights, $300,000 in private investigator fees, and countless tears to arrange. For Harrison, I wrote, my handwriting still elegant despite the tremor in my fingers. The truth will set you free. But first, it will make you pay. 22 years earlier, I had walked down the aisle toward Harrison Mitchell, the ambitious young investment banker whose charisma had swept me off my feet during a charity gala in Manhattan. Back then, I was Vanessa Reynolds, the promising marketing executive with a corner office and a 5-year plan. Harrison had looked at me with such conviction when he promised to love me forever that I never questioned our future together. We agreed early in our marriage to focus on our careers rather than having children, a decision that now left me facing my new reality without even the comfort of a family legacy. I placed the envelope inside my Hermes bag, a 10th anniversary gift from Harrison, and moved to the window overlooking our immaculately landscaped 3-acre property. The spring roses were blooming in brilliant reds and pinks, tended weekly by the gardener Harrison had insisted we needed. Every inch of our life together had been carefully curated to project success, stability, and wealth, from our art collection to our summer home in the Hamptons. Now I understood it had all been just another investment for him, one he had no intention of dividing fairly when he moved on to his next acquisition. The sound of my phone ringing pulled me from my thoughts. It was Diane Sutherland, my oldest friend and the only person who knew the full extent of my plan. "Are you ready for tonight?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "You don't have to go through with this, Van. We could still handle it privately through the lawyers." I closed my eyes, remembering the moment 6 months ago when my world had shattered beyond recognition. The memory still had the power to steal my breath. "I need to see his face, Diane," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "When he realizes I wasn't as naive as he thought, when he understands exactly what he's losing." "I'll be there the entire time," she promised. "Just give me the signal if you need an exit strategy." After ending the call, I moved to my closet. Sure. Room larger than the entire apartment I had lived in when Harrison and I first met. I ran my fingers across the designer dresses I had collected over years of attending charity galas and corporate events as the perfect corporate wife. My hand stopped on a crimson Carolina Herrera gown that Harrison had never seen. I had purchased it 3 months ago specifically for this night, his milestone 50th birthday celebration at the Plaza Hotel. A celebration he believed I knew nothing about, one he was hosting with his 28-year-old executive assistant turned girlfriend Amber Collins. The dress was bold, sexy, and demanding of attention, everything Harrison had subtly discouraged over the years, preferring me to project elegant sophistication rather than turning heads. Tonight, I would no longer be constrained by his preferences. Tonight, I would finally be seen. As I applied my makeup with practiced precision, I confronted my reflection in the vanity mirror. The face looking back at me had changed over the past 6 months. Faint lines had formed between my brows from constant worry, and I had lost enough weight that my cheekbones stood in sharp relief. But my eyes held something new, a steely determination that had replaced the blind trust I once carried. The pain of discovery had nearly destroyed me. Now, it was fueling my rebirth. I still remember every excruciating detail of that rainy October afternoon when my carefully constructed life began to unravel. I had been organizing Harrison's home office while he was on what he claimed was a business trip to Tokyo. We maintained separate workspaces, his study a masculine domain of leather and mahogany that I rarely entered without purpose. That day, my purpose had been simple: locate our passport copies for an upcoming anniversary trip to Bali. What I found instead, tucked behind his collection of financial journals, was a leather portfolio containing documents for something called Mitchell Holdings LLC, a company I had never heard of, despite bearing our family name. Curiosity rather than suspicion had prompted me to open it. Inside were statements for offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, a rental agreement for a luxury apartment in Tribeca I knew nothing about, and most devastating of all, a half-written email to his lawyer discussing how to minimize financial exposure in his upcoming separation from Vanessa. My hands had trembled so violently that the papers scattered across his desk. 22 years of marriage, and he had been planning his exit strategy like a corporate hostile takeover. I hadn't confronted him immediately. Something, pride, perhaps, or a primitive survival instinct, had stopped me from revealing what I knew. Instead, I had carefully photographed every document before returning them exactly as I'd found them. Then I had gone to our bedroom, closed the door, and experienced the first panic attack of my life, gasping for breath on the Italian silk duvet we had selected together during a trip to Milan, my chest constricting as if caught in a vice. When Harrison returned from his business trip 3 days later, I noted the fresh tan that Tokyo in October couldn't possibly have provided. He brought me an expensive pearl necklace, which I accepted with a performance of gratitude that should have earned me an Oscar. That night, as he slept beside me, I lay awake memorizing the contours of his face, wondering how many lies it had told me over the years. The next morning, I had called Diane, a high-powered divorce attorney whose client list included some of New York's most elite divorcees. "Don't confront him," had been her immediate advice when I explained what I'd discovered. "Not until we understand exactly what we're dealing with. Men like Harrison don't create elaborate financial mazes unless they're hiding something substantial." That conversation had been the first step in my 6-month journey from devastated wife to strategic adversary, from victim to victor. As I fastened the clasp on a diamond necklace, real diamonds, not the investment-grade cubic zirconia Harrison, had secretly substituted years ago, another discovery from my investigation, I checked the time. The birthday celebration would begin in 2 hours, and my driver was already waiting. Harrison believed I was attending a marketing conference in Chicago, a fiction I had maintained to keep him from suspecting I had discovered his plans. My phone chimed with a text from my private investigator, former FBI agent Marcus Jenkins. "Target and companion have arrived at the plaza. Operation is green." I took one final look at myself in the mirror, straightened my shoulders, and whispered the mantra that had carried me through the darkest months of my life. "He took your past. Don't let him take your future too." With that, I picked up my clutch containing the envelope that would change everything and headed out to deliver my husband's birthday surprise, a gift that had cost me millions to arrange, but would ultimately prove priceless. The glittering chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom cast a golden glow over the assembled guests as I paused at the entrance, allowing myself a moment to absorb the scene. More than 200 people filled the space. Business associates, clients, friends, all gathered to celebrate Harrison Mitchell's half-century milestone. A milestone he had planned to enjoy with his mistress by his side, his divorce nearly finalized, and his fortune securely hidden from his soon-to-be ex-wife. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had been the one to introduce Harrison to Amber Collins 3 years ago at a company Christmas party. I had even commented on her efficiency and drive when he mentioned hiring her as his executive assistant. Never once had I considered her a threat to our marriage, not because of the 20-year age gap, but because I had genuinely believed our partnership was solid. While Harrison and I had weathered our share of challenges over the years, infidelity had never been among them. Or so I thought. I spotted them across the room, Harrison resplendent in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo I had helped select months ago, and Amber draped against him in a gold sequined gown that left little to the imagination. Her hand possessively rested on his arm as they greeted guests, a 3-carat diamond, disturbingly similar to my original engagement ring, glittering on her left hand. The sight sent a physical pain through my chest, despite months of preparation. Despite knowing exactly what I would find tonight, seeing them together hit me with unexpected force. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. 22 years of memories flashed through my mind. Our wedding day, purchasing our first home, celebrating his early promotions, nursing him through pneumonia one terrible winter, the quiet Sunday mornings reading the paper together. Had it all meant nothing to him? Vanessa? A concerned voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. I turned to find Robert Kensington, Harrison's business partner of 15 years, staring at me with unconcealed shock. My God, I didn't expect to see you here. Does Harrison know? Not yet, I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. I wanted to surprise him. It is his birthday, after all. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Like many in Harrison's professional circle, he had diplomatically distanced himself from me when rumors of our impending divorce began circulating. I had always liked Robert, but his loyalty was ultimately to his business interests. This is awkward, he said finally. The invitation didn't mention that Harrison's wife might attend his birthday celebration, I finished, arching an eyebrow. Yes, I imagine that detail was intentionally omitted. Don't worry, Robert. I'm not here to cause a scene. I simply have a gift to deliver. Before he could respond, I spotted Diane entering the ballroom. She wore a striking black Dior gown. Her silver-streaked dark hair pulled into an elegant chignon. Beside her walked Marcus Jenkins, posing as her date but present in his professional capacity. Across the room, I noticed 3 other members of our team strategically positioned: the financial forensic expert who had traced Harrison's hidden millions, the ethical hacker who had recovered deleted emails proving his intent to defraud, and the federal agent who had taken a special interest in our case when the international dimensions of Harrison's schemes became clear. All the players were in position. It was time to begin. I made my way through the crowd, accepting curious stares and awkward greetings with practiced grace. Harrison had not yet noticed my presence, too absorbed in playing host with his young fiancée. I watched him throw his head back in laughter at something a client said, the familiar gesture now seeming like that of a stranger. The man I had loved, had built a life with, had died for me 6 months ago in his study when I discovered his betrayal. The person wearing his face now was someone else entirely, a calculated opportunist who had spent years constructing an elaborate financial labyrinth to hide assets while plotting to discard me with as little compensation as possible. What Harrison hadn't anticipated was that the corporate wife he had gradually molded me into, socially polished, emotionally reserved, and decoratively silent, was not the same woman he had married. Beneath the tasteful designer clothes and perfect hostess smile, I remained Vanessa Reynolds, the marketing strategist known for innovative problem-solving and relentless execution. Skills I had set aside to support his career, but had never truly lost. Champagne, ma'am? A waiter appeared at my elbow with a tray of crystal flutes. No, thank you, I declined. Tonight, I needed perfect clarity. The orchestra began playing Happy Birthday as a massive cake was wheeled into the center of the ballroom. Guests turned toward Harrison, applauding as he feigned surprise. Amber beamed beside him, practically vibrating with the self-importance of hosting her first major event as the soon-to-be second Mrs. Mitchell. It was during this moment of collective attention that Harrison finally saw me. Our eyes locked across the crowded room, and I watched the blood drain from his face. His practiced smile faltered, his entire body tensing as he processed the impossible. His soon-to-be discarded wife standing among his guests, witnessing the celebration he had hidden from her. I raised my empty hand in a small wave, a gesture so casual it would have seemed friendly to any observer. Only Harrison could read the promise in my eyes. The birthday song concluded, guests cheered, and Harrison mechanically went through the motions of blowing out his candles. But his eyes kept darting back to me, confusion and alarm growing with each passing moment. Beside him, Amber had noticed his distraction and followed his gaze, her perfectly arranged features contorting with shock when she spotted me. I began moving toward them, weaving through guests who parted before me with awkward murmurs. The whispers spread like wildfire. Harrison's wife was here, at the party she wasn't supposed to know about, approaching the birthday boy and his girlfriend with determined steps. "Vanessa," Harrison said as I reached them, his voice artificially steady. "This is unexpected." "Happy birthday, Harrison," I replied, leaning in to kiss his cheek as if nothing were amiss. The scent of his cologne, the same one I had given him last Christmas, brought a fresh wave of grief that I quickly suppressed. 50 is a significant milestone. I couldn't miss it. Amber shifted closer to him, her posture defensive. "We didn't think you'd want to attend, given the circumstances," she said, her voice higher than usual. I turned to her with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Amber, lovely to see you again. That's a beautiful ring. 3 carats, cushion cut. It looks remarkably like my original engagement ring, the one Harrison claimed was lost during our trip to Lake Como 5 years ago. What a fortunate coincidence." Her face flushed as she unconsciously covered the ring with her other hand. Harrison's jaw tightened, the muscle pulsing beneath his skin, a telltale sign of his anger that I had learned to recognize over decades together. "Perhaps we could speak privately," he suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "In a moment," I replied. "First, I wanted to deliver your gift. After 22 years together, finding something special for your 50th birthday was quite challenging." I opened my clutch and removed the cream envelope, offering it to him with steady hands. "What is this?" he asked, suspicion evident in his voice as he made no move to take it. "Open it and see," I encouraged, maintaining my composure even as my heart raced painfully against my ribs. "I think you'll find it illuminating." With obvious reluctance, Harrison accepted the envelope, breaking the seal with his thumb. As he withdrew the contents, documents detailing each of his hidden accounts, properties registered under shell companies, and evidence of his systematic financial deception. I watched his expression transform from confusion to disbelief to unmistakable fear. "This isn't possible," he whispered, flipping through the pages with increasingly frantic movements. "How did you find your offshore accounts? Discover your apartment in Tribeca where you and Amber have been playing house? Identify the assets you've been hiding through shell corporations in Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands?" I supplied, keeping my voice low enough that only he, Amber, and Diane, who had positioned herself nearby, could hear. "It turns out I'm not the decorative, financially illiterate trophy wife you assumed I was." Amber peered at the documents, her expression changing as she began to understand what she was seeing. "Harrison, what is this?" Before he could answer, I continued. "The divorce papers you had me served with last month claimed your net worth was $8.3 million, with most assets tied up in our primary residence and illiquid investments. Imagine my surprise to discover your actual worth exceeds $74 million, meticulously hidden in accounts and properties I was never meant to know about." Harrison's face had grown alarmingly pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the papers. 22 years of marriage had taught me his every expression, and what I saw now was pure panic. "Whatever you think you've found, you've misunderstood," he attempted, his voice lacking its usual authority. "These are legitimate business structures, tax, optimization strategies, nothing illegal. That's not what the IRS and SEC think," I replied, nodding subtly toward the federal agent who had now positioned himself near the ballroom's exit. They were particularly interested in the undeclared accounts in Zurich and Singapore. Apparently, International tax evasion carries significant penalties. Harrison's eyes darted around the room, noting for the first time the strategic positioning of strangers who didn't belong in his carefully curated celebration. Understanding dawned on his face. This wasn't merely a confrontation. It was an ambush. "You've had me investigated?" His whisper held a dangerous edge. "For 6 months," I confirmed. "Every account, every transaction, every communication with your attorney about how to leave your wife of 2 decades with virtually nothing. Did you really think I would discover your betrayal and simply accept whatever crumbs you deigned to leave me?" Amber stepped back slightly, uncertainty clouding her features as she looked between us. "Harrison, what is she talking about?" "You told me the divorce was amicable, that Vanessa had agreed to a fair settlement." I laughed softly, the sound devoid of humor. "Is that what he told you, Amber? That I happily agreed to walk away from 22 years with barely enough to maintain a modest apartment while he kept the mansion, the Hampton house, and the vast majority of assets?" I turned back to Harrison. "You always underestimated me. That was your fatal mistake." Robert Kensington had approached during our conversation, his expression grave. "Harrison, there are federal agents here. What's happening?" Before Harrison could respond, the ballroom lights dimmed, and the massive video screen that had been displaying professional photographs of Harrison throughout the years flickered to a new image, documentation of his offshore accounts, followed by emails between Harrison and his attorney discussing how to hide assets from Vanessa's financial team during discovery. A collective gasp echoed through the ballroom as guests recognized what they were seeing. Harrison lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage, only to be intercepted by Marcus, who stepped between us with practiced efficiency. "That's enough, Mr. Mitchell," Marcus said quietly. "You don't want to add assault charges to your problems." The federal agent was now moving purposefully toward us, accompanied by 2 colleagues who had been stationed outside. The carefully orchestrated birthday celebration had transformed into Harrison's public undoing. "You've ruined me," Harrison hissed, his voice breaking. 22 years together and you destroy everything in one night?" I stepped closer, looking directly into the eyes of the man I had once loved beyond reason. "No, Harrison. You ruined us when you decided I was disposable, when you plotted to discard me with nothing after I gave you everything. I'm simply ensuring you face the consequences of your choices." As the federal agents approached to formally detain Harrison for questioning regarding tax evasion and financial fraud, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what might have been, mixed with the first tentative sense of closure. Amber stood frozen, the reality of her situation becoming increasingly clear. Her secure future with a wealthy older man was evaporating before her eyes, replaced by the messy uncertainty of being engaged to someone facing potential criminal charges. "The apartment in Tribeca is registered to a shell company," I told her quietly. "But the utilities are in your name. You might want to find alternate accommodation before the assets are frozen. The authorities tend to move quickly in cases like this." Her eyes widened with the realization that her comfortable life was collapsing alongside Harrison's carefully constructed financial facade. Diane appeared at my side as Harrison was escorted from his own birthday celebration, stunned guests parting, to let the surreal procession pass. "Let's get you out of here," she murmured, her arm steady around my waist. Only then did I realize I was trembling, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation beginning to ebb. The emotional cost of the evening, of the past 6 months, suddenly felt overwhelming. "It's done," I whispered, more to myself than to Diane. "It's finally over." But as we moved toward the exit, I knew this wasn't truly an ending. It was a painful, necessary transition to whatever came next. A future I would now face alone, but on my own terms, with the financial security I had earned through 22 years of partnership. Harrison had thought he could erase me from his life while keeping the fortune we had built together. Instead, He had triggered a reckoning that would reshape both our futures in ways neither of us could have imagined when we'd exchanged vows. All those years ago. 6 months after Harrison's catastrophic 50th birthday celebration, I sat in the sun-drenched breakfast nook of my new Riverside Drive apartment, reviewing the final settlement documents my legal team had delivered. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the Hudson River, autumnal sunlight dancing across the water as sailboats drifted by. The doorbell rang, and I welcomed Diane, who had become not just my attorney, but a true friend through the divorce battle that had made headlines in financial circles across the country. "It's really over," she announced, setting her briefcase on my kitchen counter. "Harrison's plea deal is finalized. 5 years in a minimum security facility, forfeiture of all undeclared assets, and a $12 million fine." She poured herself a cup of coffee from the carafe I had prepared. "You're officially the wealthiest client I've ever represented." I absorbed this information quietly. The whistleblower reward from the IRS had been substantial, 30% of the recovered. Taxes, penalties, and interest from Harrison's hidden accounts, amounting to nearly $9 million. Combined with my divorce settlement, where I received not the 10% Harrison had planned to offer but 65% of our marital assets, my financial future was secure beyond anything I'd imagined. "How is he?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. Despite everything, part of me still cared about the man who had been my partner for over 2 decades. Diane's expression softened. "Broken," she said honestly. "The Harrison Mitchell who terrified junior analysts and charmed potential clients doesn't exist anymore. The man I saw in court yesterday is diminished." I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction or triumph. Those feelings had been briefer than I'd expected. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet, might never be. Perhaps it was simply acknowledgement that justice, painful as it was, had been served. "And Amber?" I couldn't help asking. "Left him 3 weeks after the arrest, once his accounts were frozen. She's dating a tech entrepreneur in San Francisco now." Diane studied me carefully. "Does that make you feel better or worse?" "Neither," I replied truthfully. "Her betrayal feels almost secondary now. She was just a symptom of the real problem, Harrison's fundamental belief that I was an asset he could depreciate and discard when convenient." We moved to the living room with our coffee, settling into the comfortable seating area I had carefully furnished during my fresh start. The walls, once bare, now displayed artwork I had selected myself, pieces that Harrison would have dismissed as too modern, too provocative, or too personal. "Have you thought more about the foundation?" Diane asked, referring to my plans to use part of my settlement to establish a nonprofit supporting women rebuilding their lives after difficult divorces. "The paperwork should be finalized next month," I confirmed. "I've already assembled a board and identified our first 3 grant recipients." I paused, looking out at the river. Some good should come from all this pain. The weight of the past, 2 years, from discovery to investigation to legal battles, had transformed me in ways I was still understanding. The panic attacks that had plagued me during the worst months had subsided. The sleepless nights had gradually given way to peaceful rest. The woman who had once defined herself primarily as Harrison Mitchell's wife had discovered she was far more resilient and capable than she had ever acknowledged. "The article comes out tomorrow," Diane reminded me gently. "Are you prepared for that?" I nodded. After declining dozens of interview requests, I had finally agreed to share my story with a respected financial magazine, not as a personal exposé, but as a cautionary tale about financial transparency in marriage and the importance of women maintaining financial literacy even in seemingly secure relationships. "I'm not hiding anymore," I said, realizing the truth of the statement as I spoke it. Harrison's need for secrecy infected our marriage long before Amber appeared. I was complicit in that by not asking questions, by not demanding transparency. Diane raised her coffee cup in a toast to asking questions. "And to uncomfortable answers," I added, clinking my cup against hers. Later that evening, after Diane had left, I found myself drawn to the small wooden box I kept in my bedroom, the only item I had taken from Harrison's study before leaving our Westchester home for good. Inside lay the few genuine mementos of our life together that I hadn't been able to discard. The dried orchid from our wedding bouquet, ticket stubs from our honeymoon in Venice, a handwritten note he had left on my pillow on our 10th anniversary. For years, I had believed these items represented our true connection, the private moments of tenderness between public success. Now I recognized them as fragments of a relationship that had been corroding from within long before it visibly cracked. My phone chimed with a text from my younger sister in California. "Just booked my flight for Thanksgiving. Can't wait to see the new place. So proud of you, V." I smiled, feeling a warm surge of gratitude for the family and friends who had surrounded me during the darkest period of my life. While Harrison had been systematically disconnecting me from my support systems throughout our marriage, subtly discouraging close friendships, creating distance between me and my family, I had reclaimed those relationships with a newfound appreciation for their importance. Tomorrow, I would meet with my financial advisor to discuss investment strategies for my foundation. Next week, I would begin teaching a financial literacy workshop for women at a community center in Queens. The month after, I would finally take that trip to Japan I had always wanted to experience. Not the sanitized luxury version Harrison would have insisted upon, but a more authentic exploration I had planned myself. At 49, I was starting over in ways I had never anticipated. There were still difficult days, moments when grief for what I had believed we shared would overwhelm me unexpectedly. The betrayal of 22 years couldn't be processed and discarded in neat, predictable stages. But as I closed the memory box and returned it to its shelf, I realized I was opening it less frequently now. The past was gradually taking its proper place, not forgotten but no longer dominating my present or determining my future. Harrison had once told me, during our early years together, that the true measure of a successful life was not what you accumulated, but what you survived. As I stood in my new home, a space that was entirely mine, filled with choices that were entirely mine, I recognized the ironic truth in his words. I had survived his betrayal. I had survived the systematic dismantling of our shared life. I had survived the public humiliation and private grief of a marriage ending after 2 decades. More than survived, I had emerged stronger, wiser, and finally free to write the next chapters of my story without compromise or constraint. That was a success Harrison, for all his millions and machinations, would